Good afternoon, and welcome to our first virtual Virginia Food Security Summit. I'm Bettina Ring, Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry. In my role in Governor Northam's cabinet, I work to support agriculture and forestry, two of our largest industries. And we do that through rural economic development, making sure that we're retaining farmland and forest land, and addressing food insecurity. This Virginia Food Security Summit is a great opportunity for us to come together virtually. And we're excited to be joined by over 500 attendees. I know you sold out, I think, over a week ago, and that's a huge deal. And it shows your commitment and interest in this and your engagement as stakeholders. And we have attendees from all over the Commonwealth today. I really cannot think of a better way to rededicate ourselves to the fight against hunger than being here today and being here together. It's been a big week already, and we have more to come. And I just thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. We know that COVID-19 has renewed our commitment to ensuring that all Virginians have access to the food that they need to grow and thrive. This crisis has certainly created disruptions in the supply chain across the board. It's affecting us financially, we know, physically, mentally, on so many different levels, emotionally. And we know that we saw, certainly in the beginning, we all worked really hard to make sure that we were doing all that we could to keep the food supply chains open, but we saw those disruptions at the grocery store. We saw many of us transitioning to ordering our food online. We know that it's been changing our day-to-day lives in so many different ways. And when we think about the stress of COVID-19 and the disastrous effects across the state, across the nation, across the world, we know that that what was already going on, many people were being impacted where we have institutional poverty long before COVID hit. And so this has only accelerated the need that we have to work together to address food insecurity. So for many families, for many Virginia families, hunger and food insecurity have just been a part of their lives for a long time. And we often in agriculture talk about feeding the world. It's something that we're proud of. We know in Virginia we have a very diverse industry. It's our #1 industry. And we're proud of the fact that we know we have the food systems in place to feed the world. But yet, if we look around us, we know right here in our backyard, across the Commonwealth, that we have families, we have children that are hungry. And so we have to think about how we address that right here in our backyard first, before we can think about feeding the world and really embracing that in a bigger way. And it really takes all of us working together. And if you think about each part of the food system, each part plays a role. And many of you are coming to this summit today engaged representing different aspects of that food system or the distribution and helping ensure that we get this out to families. And so, you know, when we look at what we have going across the state, we know that we're helping students and we're making sure that they have meals. We're assisting families with accessing SNAP to make sure that they're putting food on the table, and we're strengthening that food supply chain by connecting with our farmers and our producers across the Commonwealth. And I think right now, especially, there's more interest in and a need to support our local farmers and to buy locally. And so that's one silver lining, that we can take that and move that forward as we continue to make sure that we're addressing hunger. And I'm so excited about the fact that we have such a strong network across the state, and you're making a difference. You all are making a difference. When we look at what the work that's being done, I've been fortunate to be serving in this role. I'm very honored to be serving in this role. I have the good fortune of working with our Assistant Secretary, Heidi Hertz, who has devoted her career to ending hunger and is working with many of you in many different capacities. Working with our Ag Commissioner, Dr. Jewel Brennan, which you'll be hearing about later if you're in her breakout session. But we're fortunate to be able to have a First Lady that cares deeply about addressing this issue. We're fortunate to have the Children's Cabinet in place, and we know that this is continuing from our previous First Lady, from Mrs. McCullough now to Mrs. Northam, and to have that commitment to be able to ensure that we're working in an integrated fashion to really address the needs that we have, to ensure that we're taking care of our children. And so when you look at the secretariats that are engaged and all of the stakeholders, many of you that have been involved in our working groups, it's really, you know, it's really spreading, addressing everything from education, from early child care, healthcare, public safety, our agricultural sectors, all under the umbrella of the Children's Cabinet. And this has allowed us to focus our efforts. It's allowed us to combine strengths and to be more impactful. It's allowed us to support children and families across the Commonwealth in new and creative ways. And earlier this week, Governor Northam, First Lady Mrs. Northam, and our stakeholders released the Virginia Roadmap to End Hunger, a first of its kind. And many of you that are here today participated in that, have been helping us along the way to get to this point. And it's a milestone. It's something to celebrate. But we know we have much more work to do. You're going to be hearing from a number of speakers today that have been very engaged in pulling that roadmap together, and they'll have much more to share on that. But this tool is really an aspirational pathway forward with multiple programs and sectors spanning many agencies and many secretariats, all with one goal. And I think that's why we're all excited about this, that we know by working together with and through each other, we'll be successful in ensuring that we're feeding families across the Commonwealth. The roadmap prioritizes things that we know we must do to end food insecurity in the Commonwealth. Not only from, again, prior to COVID, but now that we're in the thick of COVID and what that means to us, the impact that it's having. And then when we get on the other side of this pandemic, we know that there's going to continue to be needs, but it really requires right now all hands on deck. And we know that we have strong hands across the Commonwealth, and hands that are getting dirty and working hard to make this happen. And we know that so much more will happen, again, working collaboratively. We won't be able to do it all at once. And again, this roadmap provides ambitious policy, program, and outreach goals for us. But we know that by moving forward, one step at a time, we'll get there. This report really looks beyond the current struggles, as I mentioned. It outlines a path forward. It allows us to make significant progress toward goals to end hunger for good. And that's something that we're all very, very committed to. Today, you will hear from many presenters. As I mentioned, you'll be hearing right away from some folks that have been very engaged in putting this roadmap together, but you'll be hearing more about work that's been taking place, and you'll be hearing some personal stories that I think will really help you think more deeply about the impact of hunger here in the state, the impact that it's having on individuals and communities. And I hope that you'll participate in the second hour. The first hour is going to be very rich, but in the second hour, then we're going to have these breakout sessions that will allow you to be more engaged and to really have some, I think, some strong takeaways so that we can get to work right away. And so I just want to briefly mention those sessions, because I do hope you'll take time to be part of those conversations, part of the dialogue. We'll have one on child nutrition. emphasizing the role of school nutrition in making sure that children are healthy and that they're able to perform academically. It's really critical, and we know right now that's even more challenging because of how we're having to move forward in protecting our children and what we're having to do with schools across the Commonwealth. The second session, Food as Medicine, recognizing that our health is influenced by social determinants of health, including access to food. And there's much that's happening right now as it relates to that. And then healthy food access, making that critical link between farm to table, supporting both the agricultural sector and Virginia's families. And you'll be hearing more from our Ag Commissioner, Dr. Jewel Bernat. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you for all the good work that you're doing. I'm so proud of you and just so grateful. I know the Governor and First Lady are as well. And we're going to continue to support you as we move forward in this administration. I hope that today's event really leaves you inspired, wanting to do even more, and knowing that we can be successful by working hand in hand moving forward. And so now I have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, who is the Executive Director of the Federation of Virginia Food Banks, and that's Eddie Oliver. And so Eddie joined us again. He's been instrumental in working on this roadmap with us. And so I cannot thank him enough for his leadership or his dedication to ending hunger. I'm going to turn things over to Eddie now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Ring. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to have the kind of cross-secretariat support that we have in Virginia across agriculture, social services, health. We know that food security touches many different areas of work and policy, and so we're very grateful for that. And I think that's reflected here in the roadmap. Thank you to everyone who's joined us this afternoon. This is really just a chance for us to introduce the roadmap. We have a full session. We have got a lot of content here in the first hour. I do hope you can join us for the breakout sessions. So we won't have a chance for dialogue, at least in this first hour, but please know this is just the start of the conversation. The roadmap is really a beginning. It builds on successes that have already been taking place, work that is already underway. I hope many of you see your work and efforts here in the roadmap, and the roadmap helps you get a better sense of the big picture. What else is going on in Virginia and how your work fits into it. So I'm just going to speak to the origins of the roadmap, the initial work that went into identifying some of the strategies that we've prioritized here. This project began in earnest really early in 2019 when we did a series of listening sessions in collaboration with the Food Bank Network, the Federation, and the Department of Social Services and the Governor's Office. And this was a chance for us to hear from stakeholders and advocates throughout Virginia in many different communities. We also prioritized listening sessions where we heard from people with lived experience. Often the folks with the best insight into the solutions are those who live with the problems every day. In fact, that's typically the case. And we know we need to continue to engage with food insecure families moving forward. This wasn't just a one point in time data collection. I want to share some of these takeaways, and these are high level summaries. There's a lot of nuance in here and we heard a lot of different things, but these are some of the big takeaways that influenced our strategies. Increasing communication. That was a big one that came up often. And the roadmap is very much seeking to improve that in that regard. It's getting everyone working from the same playbook, the same set of solutions, the same set of statistics, and we want to facilitate more conversations moving forward. It gives us a place to start in communication across communities, because we know what's working in Northern Virginia could very well be applied to Southwest Virginia. And are we making sure that communication is happening, as well as between the local level and the state level? There's substantial transportation issues and barriers, and we often heard about some of the holistic challenges. Folks who are living with food insecurity are often struggling with housing issues, with transportation issues. And so positioning food security as part of the holistic needs of an individual or a family was very important to the development of this roadmap. Workforce development, skills training, nutrition education. These were some other things that often came up. And so as a food bank network, we have been thinking about how we can better layer emergency food as a service in partnership with other organizations. So when someone's participating in a workforce development program, when someone's trying to advance their career at community college, how can we make sure they're getting food they need for their family? So that's one thing off their plate they don't have to worry about, and they can focus on advancing their career, just as one example. Growing interest in urban farming, community gardens, and the desire to have improved connectivity in the food system. Secretary Ring spoke to this, and you'll see some, I think, really exciting opportunities in the roadmap in this regard, where we know that the health of our local and regional food system is very directly tied to food security. When minority-owned farms, small farmers are doing well, we know we're often investing in under-resourced and historically marginalized communities. And addressing food deserts is a key aspect of improving food access overall. So in addition to getting some of the direct feedback and the lived experiences, the perspectives of folks on the ground, we also want to make sure we had a good sense of what the data looked like. And of course, the data is very different now since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, but in many respects, it's still the same. So prior to the start of the pandemic, we had about 843,000 Virginians who were living with food insecurity, including 234,000 children. I really encourage folks, if you're not familiar with it, to look up Map the Meal Gap online. This is a resource from Feeding America that provides county level and city level food insecurity on an annual basis. And because of the different data sets they have access to, it usually runs about 2 years behind. So that number is their best estimate of where the state was at in 2018. But using a pretty sophisticated data analysis, Feeding America is anticipating that as many as 447,000 additional Virginians will experience food insecurity as a result of the pandemic, increasing from just under 10% to 15% on an annual basis. We know that food insecurity is a symptom of poverty, and so it's important for us to look at overall where are we on the poverty measure and how that relates to the cost of living, right? And so that's an important measure to take into account, as well as not only are people getting the income they need, but what does it actually cost to survive? And I'll mention that Map the Meal Gap does factor in the cost of an average meal in Virginia and what that gap is. And you'll see in the strategies that we are cognizant of the fact that food security is a social determinant of health. Many studies show that food insecurity is associated with decreased nutritional intake, increased rates of mental health issues, diabetes, hypertension in particular. Food insecure seniors are 2.3 times more likely to report being in poor or fair health compared to food secure seniors. And so there's a tremendous amount of potential in partnerships that are explicit and targeted with treating food access issues as a health intervention. We know that many of our nutrition programs are underutilized, and we need to increase participation in those. So that was a key metric that we wanted to look at. And then there was a study conducted by Virginia Tech in April of this year that surveyed low-income families, and we found some truly stark and troublesome statistics from this study, where almost 70% of these households said it was often or sometimes true that they would worry if their food would run out before they got money to buy more. And that is really a very good approximation of what food insecurity looks like. It is an irregular and uneven ability to purchase enough food to feed your family in a healthful and nutritious fashion. 17% said that in the last 12 months, their child or children were ever hungry and just couldn't afford more food. And so these are really heartbreaking numbers. Northwestern estimated that the food insecurity rate in Virginia increased from 9.4% in February to 22% in June. So it makes sense. It's logical that with all the shutdowns, the increased unemployment we've seen, that we're going to see these increases of food insecurity. So the question is, how long does this sustained level last? We're seeing 25% higher demand for emergency food in the food bank network. Our food banks are purchasing 2 times as much food every month compared to what they were in 2019. And we feel like we're probably in this for some time now, and it's going to take sustained investment, and it makes the strategies here in the roadmap all that more urgent, that we work together at the local and state level to bring about some of these goals. And there's no one better to speak to those strategies and goals than our Commissioner of Social Services. Duke Storen became the Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Social Services in 2018 and has prioritized hunger, food security. He has worked in the sector for quite some time at USDA and Share Strength, and has been a longtime advocate, and very grateful to have you as part of the summit today, Commissioner.
Great. Well, thank you, Eddie, and good afternoon, everybody. Correct, I am Commissioner of the Department of Social Services, but much more importantly, I'm a father of 5, I'm a resident of Spotsylvania, and I'm a person that believes that hunger is just plain wrong in a country as wealthy and filled abundantly with food like ours. So today I am profoundly honored, grateful, and energized to be with you at Virginia's first annual Food Security Summit. We will be back here every year until there is no more hunger in Virginia. So I am honored to be with an amazing group of leaders. And I'm not talking about Eddie and Secretary Ring. I'm talking about every person participating in today's summit, not our panelists, not those with director or CEO in their title. For me, leadership is action. It's not position. And the very fact that you are here today, I know that you are a person of action, because we're here today to form hunger action coalitions and to make action a reality in implementing the roadmap to end hunger. I'm also grateful. I'm grateful that we've had such an overwhelming response to today's summit. We maxed out, and the only reason we maxed out on participation today is because of the limitations of our technology. I'm convinced we would have had not 500 people, but thousands of people had we been able to. And next year, we'll plan accordingly. And it's so important, and I'm so grateful, because we are at a moment in time where we need everyone to be focused on the hunger crisis in Virginia and across the nation. As we heard Eddie talk about the numbers, close to 1/4 of Virginians at this moment are struggling to put food on the table. So we need to mobilize now, not after we do our organization strategic planning, not after we finish the first 25 things on our to-do list, or wait for a board of supervisors, a board of directors, or anybody else to tell us what to do, because hungry people can't wait. Finally, I'm energized because this is a problem we can solve if we do it together. We're not here to simply make an improvement, not here to shave a few points off the food insecurity rate. I've spent a career fighting poverty and hunger in federal and state government, at not-for-profit organizations, and studying these problems and the strategies to address them in academia. And what this roadmap represents are strategies that work. And I know that local coalitions of amazing stakeholders work. We've proven this over and over again in different issues. And when we put these two powerful evidence-based efforts together, we will create a Virginia where no one goes hungry. So the roadmap is a guide. It's a guide to strategies that help us end hunger across the Commonwealth, in every community in the Commonwealth: urban, suburban, rural, coastal, inland, mountains, plains. As diverse as Virginia is in its geography, it's just as diverse in its people. So the roadmap is also for every person in Virginia, of every race, ethnicity, religion, income level, gender identity, and age. So what is this magic all about? Eddie mentioned some of the great strategies, and I'm going to go to it in just a little more detail. Think about it in sort of 5 buckets. First, more meals to more kids and seniors through the federal nutrition programs. These programs are 100% federally funded. So the more meals we serve, the more hunger we reduce, and the better the return on Virginia taxpayers' investments. We can expand these programs all day, all night, every community, and the federal government's going to foot the bill every time. We have seen great progress over the last years in many of these strategies, starting with expanding the school breakfast program. Through the efforts of our school nutrition professionals, the State Department of Education, and great nonprofit partners like Share Our Strength, we've seen a tremendous, literally millions more school breakfasts served in Virginia. We need to go the last mile and make sure every child has school breakfast every day. We know that that happens through universal, and it happens through alternative breakfast models. And today in our pandemic environment, because of federal waivers, we're able to offer universal breakfast, lunch, and after-school snacks or meals at no cost to every Virginia student. We are in this amazing natural experiment. We need to promote these opportunities, maximize them today, which will both feed hungry kids, as well as for a generation or more and forever eliminate the stigma of free school meals. We also need to increase our after-school meals programs. This is the hidden gem. Just like breakfast and lunch, there's an at-risk after-school meal program. Of course, our federal partners have organized, and Congress has organized this in the most confusing possible way. So it's a different program, not through the National School Lunch Program. It's through the Child and Adult Care Food Program. But we have an opportunity now, just like breakfast and lunch, to provide that after-school meal to every kid that needs one throughout the Commonwealth. And numerous studies have shown that schools that effectively participate in this program significantly improve the revenue of their food service, in addition to providing hungry kids the meals they need. We need to come out of the other end of the pandemic with every school that's eligible to do this, to be able to, every school that's eligible to do CACFP at risk, to be participating or ensuring that there's access through another partner in the community. Childcare. Hey, childcare is on my mind. It's on your mind. It's on everybody's mind today with virtual learning and social distancing. What people don't think about when they think about childcare is that in childcare, we can serve healthy meals and the federal government will reimburse us. So expanding the child and adult care food program participation by childcare providers is a slam dunk, and you can do that. It is not as easy as we want it to. Schools are predominantly public, and we have a public channel into schools. Childcare is an exclusively private market. So we've got to reach out to every childcare provider, which are predominantly small businesses owned by women and minorities. It's good for their bottom line. It's good for kids. It's good for fighting hunger. We need to make sure that we solve the summer hunger crisis for good. Again, the pandemic has offered us sort of natural experiments and motivation. Every school district in Virginia, for the first time ever last summer, used the summer food service program and offered it in their community. We can never stop that level of commitment and investment by our food service professionals, our heroes in school food. And we also implemented something called Pandemic EBT, which is a household benefit that went out to every free and reduced price school child eligible, every school child eligible for free and reduced price meals. That was over 630,000 children that received that benefit. That is the best way to reach kids when they're not in school. We just did 2 issuances. We're throughout the school year. And when the pandemic is over, we need to keep that up and do it in the summer through summer EBT. Second big bucket, we need to increase the purchasing power of households so they can buy healthy food for their families. I won't get into all the details, but we have room to expand both WIC and SNAP. If we increase SNAP participation rates by 15%, like we're calling for in the roadmap, we will serve an additional 117,000 individuals and pull down over $20 million more per month and 100% federal benefits into the Virginia economy. We need to create a no wrong door into WIC, not just through the health departments. Anytime a person touches a place that's serving low-income families through healthcare or social services or housing, they should end up getting a WIC application. And finally, like Eddie mentioned, we need to be promoting job training programs that lead to individuals earning a living wage. Bucket number 3 is eliminating food deserts by better leveraging Virginia's agriculture sector. We can increase the procurement of Virginia-grown foods in the child nutrition programs. We can expand Virginia Fresh Match, just the best deal around. That's we're a voluntary network of farmers markets and mobile markets, CSAs. They all double the value of federal benefits like SNAP for those that come to their programs. We can expand the WIC and senior farmers market nutrition programs. And finally, create a Virginia agriculture surplus program where we get the donation of local food crops to the food bank network. The fourth bucket is strengthening the connections between food access and the healthcare sector. Good nutrition leads to good health. We've proven it over and over again. Food is medicine, and bad food is just the opposite. So we need to expand nutrition education. We need to identify through the health sector who is struggling with hunger so that we can bring interventions to them. And there's something called the vital signs, a 2-question food security screener. Everybody can use this no matter what your business is, no matter what services you provide. You come in the front door, come in the back door, come in the virtual door. Everybody should be asking these 2 questions and know where to refer people if they screen in for food insecurity. We can expand home delivered meals by making it a covered service under Medicaid. In the very short run, this is an advocacy play, right? Every one of us has a member of the General Assembly. We all live in Virginia in a district somewhere. So whether you're allowed to in your organization or you do it as an individual, ideally you do it as both. We have an opportunity for Medicaid to cover home delivered meals. This will allow us to expand that important service. We've seen how vital that is, especially for our seniors during the pandemic. Our AAAs and our food banks and our other home delivered meals providers have been nothing short of heroes when it comes to doing this in the pandemic. And finally, there's terrific opportunities to expand urban agriculture, lots of them in the roadmap. So the roadmap can show us the way, but we've got to do the hard work to get there. Like any good road trip, the fun comes in having a car full of people. Today, we have a full car. We need to do this work together. We can't end hunger by waiting on the state or federal government to solve the problem, thinking that food banks and churches can offer enough food boxes and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We can't wait for corporate philanthropy to fill the gaps or schools to end hunger for our students. It's an all-in proposition. We're all in the car. These strategies need to be implemented concurrently in every community throughout the Commonwealth. So let's work together across all of our sectors, all of our communities. The strategies require action from each one of us and each one of our organizations. Since every community across Virginia has different needs and different assets, the strategies may come to life and look different in different places, but to be successful, they'll have one ingredient in common: a local hunger action coalition being intentional about planning and working collaboratively to implement these strategies. So today is not about a plan, it's about a call to action. Our hungry Virginians, our neighbors, they cannot wait. Their numbers are growing. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your commitment to working together to ensure no one in Virginia goes hungry. I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next, we have Dr. Bree Haupt, who's an assistant professor at VCU in the Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness Department. Dr. Haupt is here to share with us a personal story of her experience with food insecurity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eddie, and thank you to the Federation of Virginia Food Banks for allowing me the time to speak today and to all of you attending. So on paper, I'm a very high achieving individual. And if you judge the book by its cover, I have it all together and I enjoy many privileges in life. But I can't help but think of how hunger has no boundaries and no set time frames. My childhood isn't one that many would willingly choose, and it unveiled my eyes to the harsh realities of the world. Granted, we were better off than many, but what I always saw was that individuals were treated unfairly and unequally due to what others perceived as different, and then they were being stigmatized for those differences. I didn't understand the complexities of the world, but I knew that food wasn't always available to my family and to others, and I couldn't understand the reason why. All I did know was that I enjoyed breakfast and lunch at school, and there were periods of time when bills weren't paid, but there was always something on the table for dinner, even if it was just ramen noodles. As I got older, I became acquainted with the idea of a food pantry. Now, it wasn't the structured food banks that we see in many areas now. It was my grandma's work pantry. Throughout high school, I worked at this religious conference center, and I noticed that my grandma would always send a couple women home with leftovers from that day, and sometimes even more paper bags than they could carry with unopened food items. These women were always last to leave, and my mother was one of them. Though asking for help from your family isn't always an easy thing, I once asked my grandma why she did it, and her answer was a simple one: we should love people as God loves us. Now, for some, this type of statement is just a religious saying, but for her, it was a way of life, and I started to carry that with me. I moved on from high school and became a first-generation college student, and I vividly remember picking the cheapest college because I know my family couldn't afford it, and I knew that I would always have to work multiple jobs just to get through. And it was during my undergrad that I became aware of food pantries at my university, and that I wasn't the only one who was wondering where the next meal was coming from. Granted, for a few years, I was fine. I worked in the residence halls and I got a meal plan, but some of my friends didn't have that luck, so I'd swipe them in whenever I could. But it was always surrounding me. You know, it's that look in someone's eyes and you just know and you can recognize it, and it's that unspoken request for help. So my last year, I wasn't so lucky, and I had to move off campus and fend for myself. And although I still had 2 to 3 more jobs, I was still struggling to eat at times, and the food that I could afford wasn't the most nutritious, but I managed. And I continued to manage through grad school and into my first professional job after graduation. For my first job, I worked in a residential life department at a historically Black institution where I was the first white woman hired in that department. And there was a number of students who vocalized how they doubted they could ever connect with me due to past experiences that they had with white people. But through leadership seminars, it soon became common knowledge that I had struggled with hunger throughout my lifetime. And suddenly there was numerous students applying to work in Res Life simply because of having heard that story. But what broke my heart is that these students would bring others, and these others were students who were struggling to eat and struggling to keep up with classes because they weren't sure how they were going to get the energy, and they weren't even sure if they were going to have money for housing for the next semester. So I created a system where they would just knock on my door on certain Saturdays for certain times, and they could come in and get some food that I bought that day. It was just kind of a low-key way for them to ask for help and to get the food they needed without the stigma that was coming along with it, because sometimes the stigma alone is more hurtful than the reality. So then I ended our doc program, and I was doing fairly well until I became homeless. That was fun. So not only was I working a couple jobs and having to deal with the pressures of getting a PhD, but I suddenly didn't have a home. But I was lucky enough to have a community that helped, even though they didn't know all the details, because I never wanted to feel like a burden, but this burden was often self-induced because my community just wanted to love me and to help carry that burden so that I could be successful. Another incident that really kind of calls out to me is a crisis response to Hurricane Maria that hit Puerto Rico and Florida. I went on a disaster response and recovery trip to Puerto Rico, where I worked with a group of volunteers to help local churches clean out debris and provide food for their community members. So not only were these individuals facing hunger, but many lost their homes, their jobs, their family members, their friends and pets. And it was an unexpected and uncontrollable event, and they were just left to pick up the pieces, and they hardly had anything more than the clothes on their backs, and sometimes just a cement slab where their house used to stood. This is why I believe that one of the most difficult aspects for many to realize is that food insecurity has no boundaries and no time limits. It's not a one and done situation. It's cyclical, and in many cases, it's very much out of our control. There have been years that I've been fine and years that I wish would end already. 2020 is included in that one. But 2020 has also unveiled a level of complexity to food insecurity that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. And it's what led me to reach out to the Federation of Virginia Food Banks, because I'm seeking to understand how the pandemic has impacted distribution and what we can learn for future crises. I'm reminded over and over again that it's about the critical need to love, and I spell it L-U-V. Listen, understand, and validate. Listen to the experiences of those that surround you. Seek to understand those experiences and validate them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haupt. That was, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Your story is speaks not only to your own resilience, but to the importance of putting the people that we serve at the heart of all that we do. So thank you for making that very real for us. Next, we have two folks who are representing a wonderful organization called Cultivate Charlottesville. We have Jeanette Abbey-Nader, the executive director, and Richard Morris, a very cool title, and Food Roots director for the Urban Agriculture Collective, who will share about their work at the local level in Charlottesville to work holistically across the food system to address many of the issues contained in the roadmap. And as just one example of the types of work already being done by folks that we hope to engage as Hunger Action Coalitions in the work of the roadmap.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Commissioner Secretary Heidi. We're so honored to be here. Thank you, Dr. Haupt, for sharing your story. I'm going to try and share my screen, and while I do that, I will just let you know, again, my name is Jeanette Abbey-Nader. I'm the Executive Director of Cultivate Charlottesville. We're going to give you a high-level overview of our work. It'll be a little bit of a whirlwind, since we have a little bit of time before we have to close off. So, Richard, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Richard Morris. I am the Farm and Food Roots Program Director for the Urban Agriculture Collective, which is a program of Cultivate Charlottesville.
Okay. I'm just waiting to share, but while I'm waiting, I can go ahead and just jump in. So, what do you think, Heidi?
Jeanette, I'm not seeing the share screen, but we can hear you loud and clear if you'd like to get started.
Okay. So Cultivate Charlottesville is an integrated approach to building a healthy and just food system. We have 3 core programs: City Schoolyard Garden, the Urban Agriculture Collective of Charlottesville, and the Food Justice Network. Through our work, we aim to address food insecurity in many of the ways that were discussed personally through City Schoolyard Garden, by working with students with nutrition education, giving students a hands-on experience in the gardens, in community through our Urban Agricultural Collective, working with neighbors to grow and share food in public and subsidized housing units, and then across systems and structures with the Food Justice Network, which aims to look at policy and advocacy change. Our mission is to engage youth in community building, equitable, sustainable food systems through garden-based experiential learning, growing and sharing healthy food, amplifying community leaders, and advocating for food justice. Richard, do you want to talk a little bit about our 3 programs?
Yes, so we have the City Schoolyard Garden. It's an opportunity for children to have access to gardens in their schools. We have gardens located in 9 of Charlottesville City schools and neighborhoods. Children have have access to these gardens and the ability to get their hands dirty, but also to learn about where their food comes from and to build some positive leadership skills. At the Urban Agriculture Collective, our second program, we are touching the community at the community level, where we are building equity by growing and sharing food. We have weekly resident community markets where we serve residents primarily from public and subsidized housing. And we are advancing the idea of land as liberation through our Black and Brown Farmer Initiative. And then at the Food Justice Network, which is our third program, we have a network of 35 plus organizations. We're working along the food system and exploring opportunities and barriers to amplify community voices and choice, and to mobilize and combine impact, implement strategies to transform inequities. You know, one of the quotes that I like to share with people about the Food Justice Network, this comes from one of our participants. The garden is the one place I feel at home. I feel special that I can take care of the plants and help them grow. CSG has a number of initiatives. There's we have Harvest of the Month, which is this amazing opportunity for children to be introduced to, exposed to a different crop each month. They get to taste it, whether it's tomatoes, sweet potatoes, broccoli. And then we have Farm to School and a Harvest Festival. Farm to School is an opportunity that comes up. It's an annual event that happens in October, first week of October, where we are in the schools. We bring farmers into the schools. Youth have an opportunity to hear directly from farmers. They will bring their chickens and their goats, and it's just a way, again, for children to reconnect with where their food comes from. We also have the Healthy School Foods 5-year plan, which is another initiative of CSG. We have the Spring Seedling Project. I really love this program. We have at our middle school, we have children start thousands of spring seedlings, and they plant the seeds. And once those seedlings are ready to be transplanted into the ground, those seedlings are dispersed throughout the community to all of the garden organizations. And finally, we have the Youth Justice Food Interns, who are teenagers who are actually employees that we bring on. We pay them a salary. They get to work in the garden. They get to engage the community, and they learn to be leaders. I like to say that it's an opportunity for them to learn, to grow, and to lead. And another initiative with the Food Justice Network is that there's an understanding of what hunger and food insecurity truly looks like in America. We believe that having access to your own land to grow food is one of the ways that we empower people, or people empower themselves to work toward food security and ultimately food sovereignty. As part of the work that we do, we introduce children and the adults in the community who are part of our programs to healthy, nutritious food that enables us all to perform at our best.
Thank you, Richard. That's a great overview of our 3 core programs and some of the initiatives around them. Oh, thank you, Heidi. Let's advance to slide 6, if you don't mind. So in addition to the core programs, I wanted to speak a little bit about what we've been doing during COVID, and talk a little bit about the difference between food justice and emergency food relief, which you've heard both Eddie and Secretary Stern speak to today. So some of our efforts are, in addition to the need for emergency food relief, especially during COVID, we're also focused on long-term food justice. And we see food justice as racial equity. So, you know, food is a human right. And especially in Charlottesville, so much of our food inequities fall along racial lines. I know each community is different, but in our community, it's quite distinct. And so we work to first understand what hunger and food security truly looks like in America. We focus on having access to your own land to grow the food, healthy, and having healthy and nutritious food for youth to perform their best. Next slide, please. So Richard spoke a little bit. So what is food justice? These are some of our community food advocates and youth food justice interns. Each, after having spent some time in an intensive program exploring food justice, I'll just kind of let you read these as they talk about what food justice is. Michaela Howard, who's a student that was with us for 5 years, her quote was, "Food justice starts with understanding what hunger and food security really looks like in America. It demands that everyone create a world where everyone has the opportunity to nourishing, fulfilling food at any time." Our next slide speaks to some of the initiatives that we do with City Schoolyard Garden that Richard mentioned. And then our urban agriculture initiative speaks to some of those, how we engage families in growing and sharing food at no cost. And then finally, the Food Justice Network, which is very similar to what the Hunger Coalition networks that the roadmap is proposing. This is a picture of some of our city staff working with Chantel Bingham on the left there, this is slide 10, who is the program director for the Food Justice Network. And what we have a food equity initiative that's been approved by City Council. We're working with each department within the city to identify how their work intersects with food equity. So to identify different policy and practices that they can do. So that's like a very quick overview, and I'm sorry we didn't get to see all the slides. We'll definitely share a PDF with you if that's possible. The next set of slides, we wanted to just talk about some of the strategies that we found. The roadmap talks quite a bit about the specific changes that you want to make, and then these are strategies for how to build a coalition. First of all, and you can go to slide 13, practicing anti-racism. We'll be hosting, I wanted you to see this here, we've extended the deadline for registration in case anyone on this call wants to register, but we're hosting Uprooting Racism training by Soulfire Farm on Thursday, November 19th. We started our work over here on the right. You'll see if you go to the next slide, the vision of our white paper. So we started off by doing research into our own community and some of the inequities that built our food system today. So starting with that very deep understanding is very important. The second, if you go to the next slide, the second core strategy is centering the people who are affected by hunger in the decision-making and in the actions. The third one talks about build and engaging partnerships, and both previous speakers have spoken to this. These are some of our partners with the Charlottesville Food Justice Network. We have over 35 organizations that work across the food system. And the roadmap also speaks to the Richmond Food Justice Alliance, which was a great organization, as well as Jerome Chavez with Happily Natural in Richmond that's doing that work. Our next slide looks at work at multiple levels and intersections. So you'll see here that on the right, these are the 5 core areas. So food equity doesn't only involve food, it involves transportation and food pathways, affordable housing, food access, each of these other areas. So we strive to work at multiple levels. And then the next slide looks at embracing, learning, and adapting. So you'll see in the middle here, with COVID, we had to move to direct food, helping out with providing food directly through school meals when the schools were closed. And diving into our staff and our community, always learning about and embracing change and what's needed, what the community expresses they need. And then the final strategy that I'm sharing today is just cultivating broad-based support. And Richard can share with us a little bit about some of our partners. The next slide looks at our donors.
And next slide. So there's a synergy between sun, soil, and seed that creates the magic and the miracle of what we see as when we observe plants grow. I like to think of sun as the potential energy or the potential capacity that we all have to make things happen. Soil is the communities that we live in, and the seeds are the people. And so this slide is introducing you to some of those people who make this magic happen. These are some of our food justice interns. Next slide. Here's our Cultivate staff. As you can see, we strive for assembling a crew of people who come from across the spectrum of the community, because no one person has the one solution that solves all problems. We understand that in order to get where we need to go, we need to have many minds and many hands make light work. Next slide. And this is the Cultivate Charlottesville Board of Directors with a couple of staff members in there. Next slide. These are some of our youth interns out in the garden. The slide that we don't have here, because the technology doesn't allow us to show what we need to show, which is the wider community, the hundreds, the thousands of people out there who have the same goals of solving the hunger problem in Charlottesville and across the country. We recognize that we are a collective and committed chorus of voices working across disciplines and systems to address not just near-term hunger, but a primary rooted systemic cause of that hunger, which is racial inequity and the food apartheid that flows from those inequities. It's a big problem that calls for bold solutions and a fearless commitment to change. 50 years ago, I was a recipient of the school lunch and breakfast program, and I benefited from that. But it was fundamental to me getting to where I am today. But the other part of that solution, it was education and employment opportunities. I could not have done it all by myself. I'm really excited about the speakers that I've heard so far. This kind of commitment is an amazing opportunity. We're at a point in our history where we have an opportunity to make big change. We welcome all stakeholders to join us in this very, very important work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeanette and Richard. And I think your last line may be the perfect take home for all of us from here. What a great presentation. I apologize for the technology issues, but I know that many folks, as I'm seeing messages, are really inspired by your work. And thank you for allowing us to use Cultivate Charlottesville as an example to highlight in the Roadmap to End Hunger, and appreciate also the work of the Richmond Food Justice Alliance, who's been involved. As we leave from this place, I do want to point everyone, we are getting some questions about where to get a lot of this information. And if you go to feedva.org, you're able to see the roadmap itself and all of the corresponding, let's see if I can find it for you, all the corresponding tools that we have available. And on the Connect page, you'll see a lot of the resources available, both in data form through some of our mapping technology, some connecting to local growers, and then also many of the resources to the Roadmap to End Hunger, one of which is that call to action that Commissioner Storin shared around the Hunger Action Coalition. Please enjoy a lot of the assets that are here on feedva.org, and thanks to our partners for continuing to build and allowing us to spotlight a lot of the great work that's happening across the Commonwealth here. So feedva.org is the website to go to download all the assets and information for the Virginia Roadmap to End Hunger. And I think with that, we will pause here. I appreciate all of the panelists and speakers for sharing all of the work that has been going on, both for the roadmap, but then in general around hunger and food insecurity in the Commonwealth. And we'll pause from here, and if everyone could please transition over to their breakout room. It's a separate link. And in the chat, we've put in those additional links for the three. So one being child nutrition, the second being food is medicine, and the third as healthy food access. So thanks to everyone for a great opening session, and we'll see you in the breakout room.